It's time for a PSA, podcast service announcement.
Another day in self-isolation. I've been here for weeks now, working from home as an editor for Mr. Millennial Magazine, or M&M, NM. I sure am getting lonely though. Putting off marriage and kids sure sounded great in 2011, but oh boy am I starting to feel a little lonely. Perhaps I should go outside. Maybe to a bar? Holy words with friends, there's a hologram forming right in front of my desktop computer.
Hello there, Mr. Millennial.
Hey, I know you. You're big business. The president, CEO, CFO, COO, and HR manager of Bestflix, the best streaming provider on the planet.
Ah, true, Mr. Millennial. And unlike your Fortnite, it's not virtual reality you're seeing, it's I, big business. And I couldn't help but notice you have not responded to the dozens, nay, hundreds of emails I've sent you in regards to our policy concerning this pandemic.
Sorry, big business. I just get so many emails these days. I'm sick of looking at my computer. I want to look at the world.
Now, hold on there and keep your Fitbit where I can see it. It's dangerous right now to go outside, Mr. Millennial, unless absolutely necessary. You could contract a very contagious virus, not only putting yourself at risk, but also the older individuals such as myself, trekking to the pharmacy for drugs. Prescription drugs, you degenerate.
Well, gee willikers, big business. What am I supposed to do all day in my studio apartment, surrounded by Wi-Fi, running water, and an endless array of takeout options? It's not like I can just remember my Skype password and start having virtual conversations with my friends and family I've neglected for years.
Now see, that's where I come in, Generation Y bother. In lieu of movie theaters shutting down across the world, I've taken the brave, nay, selfless action of exploiting this crisis by releasing new movies and TV shows for you to enjoy to your heart's content. I've even thrown in a few classic movies too. Some were even made before 1990.
Jumpin' Gmail, big business. That sounds sweller than a Spotify playlist that reminds me of my high school days, way back in 2007.
Yes, good. Now, I must run along and interrupt the lives of all your neighbors whom you've never met.
Hey, wait a minute, big business. I'm not even subscribed to Bestflix since you messed up my favorite TV show on their Stranger Danger things. How did you get my information show up in my apartment without my permission? And what kind of drugs are you getting at the pharmacy?
Always so clever, aren't you, Mr. Millennial? Asking the questions Generation X is too apathetic to ask while rewatching Encino Man. I assure you, Mr. Millennial, you haven't seen the last of me, big business. You will rue the day you underestimated my power over politicians.
Okay, Boomer, joke's on you, because I'm voting for a politician who will stand up for all of us, and that politician is none other than...
Cinemaholics is a nonpartisan film review talk show that admittedly has no business making polarizing commentary on big business. Yeah, see show notes for more details. Welcome once again to Cinemaholics. I am John Agroni. I'm the box office columnist for Atom Tickets. Well, not right now. Head writer of Cinemaholics.com, and I occasionally write books from a bunker. He is a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend, I hope. And he also reviews films for Cinemaholics.com. It's Will Ashton.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly hope so as well.
Yeah, I hope you're still staying busy, Will.
Yeah, I try to be.
Well, it's our first episode where neither of us went to the cinema. But wait, you're saying, this podcast is called Cinemaholics. Well, guess what? The cinema is what you make of it?
Sure.
Look, we're just adjusting. We're trying to figure this out as we go, right?
Yeah.
And let's not get fussy with the details. The cinema is officially Will Ashton's living room, and it's a very comfy living room. And
it's going to get very crowded.
Yeah, here we go, right? We're going to be talking about a bunch of films that you can watch right now on streaming. And those include Big Time Adolescence, The Banker, Stargirl, Lost Girls. It's going to be fun. But for now, you can find more episodes of Cinemaholics, including our full archive on cinemaholics.com. You can write into the show anytime by emailing us, cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. And you can support us directly by becoming one of our monthly patrons on patreon.com/cinemaholics. And of course, you can always support this podcast non-financially, but still helpfully by going to ratethispodcast.com/cinemaholics. And that's how you can find out how you can help rate this podcast and give us the star ratings that help get our show out into the ether for more people to discover during these trying times. And you guys did it over the last week. We've gotten a few 5-star reviews. So grateful for that. And like I said last week, we take those 5-star reviews as 4.5s automatically by default. And it's us listening to the listeners, and they're saying, that's what you're telling us right now. It's like, you guys are more like 4.5. You could be better. Could always be better. But this is like a loan, this 5-star rating. And so Will and I have to pay interest by interesting all of you.
I'll take your word for it.
We just have a couple of off topics to get to. First off, our extra milestone is live right now. Will Ashton and myself and Samuel Nolan talked about His Girl Friday, which celebrated its 80th anniversary this past February. We're, of course, late to the game, of course, because it's March, but really excited that extra milestone is now available. And that was a great conversation. Will, I enjoyed talking about this movie with you.
Yeah, it was neat because I think Sam mentioned in the episode that it was one of the few where we had kind of contradicting or differing opinions on the film. Not extremely so, but enough to make it a fairly lively conversation, I'd say.
Right. You were a believer in love during that episode, and I wasn't, which is kind of topsy-turvy. I don't think that usually happens, but...
I guess not.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's been kind of a, like I said, it's been trying times. We're in week 2 of self-isolation. Movie theaters across the planet, mainly United States, as we're discussing, in North America in general, movie theaters are closed right now. We can't go to the movies, and I'm feeling it. I miss the movie theater.
Yeah, same here.
It's a little... Look, it's cliche. It's a little annoying when people say this, but I'm going to say it because I'm sad. It's like another church for me going to the movies. And I feel like my spiritual connection to cinema is starting to really feel a little worn out. I miss it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, like we're going to be talking about on the show, there are other venues and different ways you can watch movies right now. So it's not like we've been robbed of them, but going to cinema is just different, and it just doesn't feel the same without going there. And, it's obviously a small thing in the scheme of things, but it's still, it does feel like a big absence, at least in our lives.
It really does, but the nice thing is that the listeners, we asked you last week to give us ideas and recommendations for the kinds of episodes you want to see moving forward. We got a lot of interest in Big Time Adolescence, which is now streaming on Hulu, so we're going to get into that in just a moment. But we also got a lot of feedback. People still really want game nights. You all had ideas for different bonus episodes we can do. We did get an email or two. Actually, we got 2 emails and a tweet or 2 about doing another Q&A episode. So a lot of interest out of nowhere for doing Q&As and things like that. And if I recall, we also got some interest in the first time viewing, but going through our favorite movies of all time. Which I know my favorite movie of all time, there's 2 of them, Mask of Zorro and The Apartment, and Knight's Tale. I'll just throw 3 in there. Do you have a couple of go-tos? Well, I know one of them is the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, and then there's Punch Drunk Love is another one. There's a couple others, but is Knight's Tale really one of your favorite movies?
Oh, yeah. You knew this. Okay. I've never been shy about it.
I don't know. I mean, you've mentioned it in a way that could seem kind of like... kind of tongue-on-cheek, so I wasn't 100% sure. I have nothing against the movie. I just didn't know it was one of your favorites. Mask of Zorro was.
It is a bit of a goofy movie, Knight's Tale. It's not exactly... it's famously one of the... It was like a Rotten Tomato score movie in its time, but as you've seen, people love that movie, myself included. It's just man, that's just a good movie with Heath Ledger and Rufus Sewell, as we mentioned. Paul Bettany, one of my favorite performances from him ever. So, and Alan Tudyk, can't forget him. So there's all kinds of movies that Will and I would love to talk about. I don't know, we'd be able to do first time viewings because I think we've seen all of each other's favorites, except for The Apartment.
Well, I was going to say, I haven't seen The Apartment, so that'd probably be the one for me.
Yeah, but we want to hold on that though, because that could be an extra milestone this year. That came out in 1960. And so Sam and I had talked about The Apartment showing up on the polls for extra milestone.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the one I'd pick for you is maybe Mary and Max, but I forget if you've seen that one or not.
I've seen Mary and Mad Max.
Well, that'd be quite a movie.
Well, all right. Keep sending the ideas our way. We're going to deliberate and figure them out moving forward. We're also trying to figure out which guests we want to bring on for what. So if you have ideas for that as well, as always, you can find us on all our typical social media channels. You can go to the show notes and do that as well. We just want to hear what you all have to think. And of course, you can always go to cinemaholics.com. Cinemaholics.what? Cinemaholics.com. www. Enjoy the rest of this episode. We hope that it is it's a little different. We're not talking about anything you can see right now in theaters, but we are going to be talking about some fascinating films. And I think this will be a good old fashioned episode in its own right. So let's get started with our first review, Big Time Adolescence. So this movie, you can watch it right now on Hulu. It actually premiered at the Sundance Film Festival last year. I missed it last year. It kind of wasn't really on my radar, but this one is kind of well known for being one of the first, more. I think it's not the first movie Pete Davidson has been in, but I think it's his first real starring role. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I know he has the Judd Apatow one presumably coming out later this year, but I believe, because I mean, other than a couple other films I can think of, they're all supporting. I mean, that's what I mean. They're all supporting performances that I can think of. So I think this is the first lead. I think. I can double check, but I'm pretty sure you're right.
He's definitely been supporting, I'm looking at his filmography right now. He's actually going to be in the Suicide Squad, the James Gunn movie that comes out next year. I
think that's supporting.
I don't know if that's a big role or anything.
I mean, from what I've heard, the casting's going to be kind of funky for that. I don't want to give anything. It might be a spoiler, but that might, I don't know, that could be lead or supporting. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was, the Big Lebowski follow-up thing. I think he was in that, but that's there's also he did a voice for one of the characters in Angry Birds movie 2. He was in The Dirt. He was in What Men Want.
Okay.
And then before that he had small roles in Set It Up. I forgot he was in Set It Up. I totally missed that he was in Trainwreck from 5 years ago.
Yeah, he was like a cameo in Trainwreck, I was going to say, cuz I think that's the first time I saw him in a movie. He was one of the patients for Bill Hader.
Yeah.
But I never got around to seeing Set Up. I remember he didn't have a big part in that, but that was around the whole Ariana Grande thing. So they really pushed he's in this movie. You know him. So they kept showing his face on a little thumbnail he's in this thing.
Yeah.
But he was
he's come a long way since.
Yeah. But he was fifth billing in that film, right? For Set It Up.
Well, and his fame has really taken off in more recent years. He had his big Netflix special. I forget the name of it, but I watched most of it, and I thought it was actually really funny.
Oh, was it? Because I heard that wasn't great.
I liked it a lot. Okay. Did Corey say he liked it? I know he saw it.
Yeah, I think he thought it was pretty good, but I don't want to speak for him.
Yeah,
I forget exactly.
It's kind of it's a B- comedy special, not too special, but yeah, I thought it was definitely a fun way to pass an afternoon. Honestly, his timing is really good, and since we're on the topic of Pete Davidson, before we get into the movie, I think he's just a very fascinating guy. He's very young. He's only 26 years old. We've definitely been aware of him for a while, but he just seems to have there's an energy around his persona that inexplicably controversy and beautiful, talented women just seem to really gravitate to this guy. What's your take on Pete Davidson in general?
Well, that's the thing. I don't really know. I don't know. I mean, I think, he's somebody who gets publicized a lot or tabloid a lot. And I know I've had it write about him a good bit for Cinema Blend. And I think, he's been through a lot. I know his personal history is definitely filled with a lot of dark and tragic moments. And I think in the right moments he can be funny, but I also think people try to push him too far. I don't know if he's really super versatile as an actor or comedic performer, but I don't know. I don't really enjoy his segment or skits on SNL, but I like his Weekend Update segments where he's just himself and kind of doing the Norm Macdonald, I'm just saying what I'm thinking right now kind of thing. But the whole every time he's on a skit, he can't go through it without smirking the whole time Jimmy Fallon. So that kind of bugs me. So I don't know where I stand on him. Is my roundabout answer. Well,
you know what? I like the guy, and I like the guy even more after seeing. I like him even more after seeing his first top billing movie, which is Big Time Adolescence. And they've kind of held on to releasing it for about a year now, obviously, or over a year. And it's a great cast. So it stars Griffin Gluck, Emily Arluke, Colson Baker, Sydney Sweeney, and John Cryer, who I wasn't expecting to see in this. The plot synopsis is very basic. We have Pete Davidson's character as this guy named Zeke, who dated this girl in high school, and he became really close with her younger brother, Mo, or also known as Monroe, played by Griffin Gluck. And over the course of about 6 years, the two of them become inseparable best friends. The movie makes several jokes about how it's like Batman and Robin, except Batman in this case is a stoner with tattoos, who's obviously a very terrible influence. And Robin in this case is kind of a high school outcast who, there's nothing all that socially awkward about him, but he spends most of the movie kind of just really trapped in the orbit of this guy, Zeke. He has a crush on this girl his age, played by Una Lawrence, Sophie. Not the only movie we'll talk about this week, by the way, that has Una Lawrence in it, surprisingly enough. And which is strange because I feel like we haven't seen Una Lawrence in a while. I can't remember the last time. Maybe it was Southpaw or Bad Moms or something.
Oh, is that who that is? I was trying to figure out who that was. Like I recognized I couldn't place it, but that's who it is. Okay.
Yeah. She's been working for a while, but I did just like 2 streaming releases in a row. I just noticed, it's like, oh yeah. There she is, Una Lawrence. And that's the movie in a nutshell. This young guy, Mo, is kind of trying to navigate. It's like coming of age, obviously. He's trying to navigate his friendship with this guy, Zeke, and ways that there's sort of like a selling drugs subplot that becomes like the main plot that is kind of sometimes feels a little crammed in there. But the real point of the movie is like this dynamic between the two guys and how it affects, I'd say this movie has a lot of subplots, actually, just to get into some criticism here, like to the point where none of it's all that cohesive. Like there's a weird rivalry between the father and Zeke that it just did not.
You found that weird?
I found it very strange. Yeah.
Okay.
There was just something about the way John Cryer is delivering that part. I know it's supposed to be intentionally off balance, but I don't know. It just felt like a different movie to me for some reason. Like a lot of this movie feels like a lot of different things sort of competing for attention. And I'm not sure. I think the thing that I like the most about the movie is probably the relationship between Mo and Zeke and how they are sort of like, you can feel them drifting apart. You can feel Mo starting to grow up a little bit, not need this guy in his life anymore. And that emotional tension is really good. And a lot of it is because Pete Davidson, I think he does have a lot of range in this movie. Like he does something kind of subtle. I don't know if it's if he's being intentionally subtle or if he's just being himself. I'm curious what your read is, but I think this is a pretty effective coming of age movie, and I think it's quite all right.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think it's pretty solid. I don't know. I do agree with the subplots, but I think I wasn't quite as bothered by the John Cryer one. I actually thought John Cryer was really good in this. Like I was anticipating that going in, nor that he would be in the movie. But
I'm not saying he was bad at all.
No, but I mean, all the stuff they did with him, I thought was pretty good. Like I didn't have any issues with how they portrayed his character or any of his subplots or the performance. Like for me, what I found kind of weird is like the Sydney Sweetie thing was a little odd. And then like there's also like another kid that is in his high school. I found like his whole deal was just kind of like, I get why like eventually in the story like they need him, but like throughout the film it's just like kind of a weird dynamic that I don't know. I get what they're going for. It just didn't quite work for me, but yeah, I mean, I agree that like this is one of those films where if I had known what film festival was in going in, I was like, was this a Sundance film? I would not be surprised because it just hits a lot of like the Sundance tropes. Yeah, I mean, it hits a lot of like the coming of age, middle America kind of things I tend to expect. Yeah, indie dramedies that I think, yeah, I mean, in that sense, like, I don't think the narrative itself is anything particularly noteworthy or anything you haven't seen before, but I do agree that I think what ultimately makes it work are the performances, particularly from Pete Davidson, who, like, I think it's more good casting for a role that was probably catered to him. Like, I don't know if I'd have to see more performances from him to really gauge where I feel about him as an actor. But I do think he does, like, I think this is good casting. I think this is a role that fits him very well, and I'm sure it was written for him, so that makes sense. But, I mean, credits where it's due. I think he does a good job. I think he does, like you say, have that kind of range and emotional range in the film that does make the character a little bit more dynamic and intriguing than he might have otherwise been. And I was also really surprised by Machine Gun Kelly is in this, and he actually is really funny in this. I was not anticipating that. I mean, I think he's done.
There are some good hearty chuckles from this guy.
Yeah, like I think the only thing I'd seen him in acting wise before this was Bird Box, and he was not good in that. Nor was a lot of people. But I mean, he's like funny in this. He gets some good lines. I think it was more that he was used rather judiciously in the film than like him being like a revelation as an actor. But I mean, I think it's a credit to the filmmakers and the editing that they find actors that I wouldn't really expect too much from, and they give fairly dynamic and intriguing performances. And, I mean, like I said, I don't think the film itself is anything particularly remarkable or anything that you haven't seen before, but I think what does well is stuff like the little moments, like you said, like their relationship together, the two main characters, and like just like kind of like everyday thing. Like there's a scene in a grocery store that I found pretty enjoyable, where it's just like, it doesn't really like service the plot much, but it's just kind of fun as far as like, kind of building this kind of off-kilter world with these characters. Also like another scene at a batting cage is kind of similar in that regard. So, it's a fun little small scale indie movie that you can stream right now. I don't think it's a must see, but in these times, I think it's perfectly fine as a nice streaming watch.
Yeah, especially because it's sort of short. It's only 90 minutes long. Right. And I was able to just finish it out really quickly it was like morning, and I got some coffee, sat in front of a TV, watched it. It was really pleasant. And yeah, there's some good laughs, even though it's like uneven how often the laughs come. You spend a lot of the movie just sort of letting yourself get more emotionally invested, which works too. I was going to say, yeah, some of the hanging threads, I thought like this movie kind of lets you down when it comes to some of the supporting female characters. I think that Emily Arlick plays Kate, the sister that Zeke dates in the beginning of the movie. And Una Lawrence, as I referenced, like they're good characters, like especially Una Lawrence, whenever she comes on, she's interesting. I think she, as a character, has a really good resolution. But there was just something about the movie's, like, I don't know, forgetful nature with how they tie into the emotional stakes that, I don't know, it felt a little soppy, especially with the sister character. I just think that there's something that she does kind of early on in the film that doesn't make too much sense, and they never really come back to it in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of conflicted because I do appreciate, okay, the movie's trying to stay a little bit more focused, and I kind of said before, like, I think it gets too bogged down in some of all the subplots. But that is actually like one subplot I think I would have preferred get a little bit more attention compared to the others.
Or at least some resolution or something.
Yeah, something a little bit more cathartic, I guess, because you get a lot with like the drug stuff, and there's like this kid with like chapped lips.
That's what else
I don't know. That whole thing is just a little bit like, I don't care, Right. And I think there's a lot of ways that I think that the idea that this kid, his life is upended by the drug scene and everything like that, there are more interesting ways to tell this story in ways that like we haven't seen before. And that's the thing, is like, it is an interesting premise, but the way they go about the big conflicts and plot, it's just, I don't know, we've seen it. Like, it is that It's too formulaic for me to like wholeheartedly recommend, even though I do recommend it to anybody who enjoys a decent laid back kind of Sundance-y movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically where I'm at, is I think it's a pretty good film on the verge of being a good film, that I think if it was a little bit tightened up, maybe did some things a little bit differently. And there's a couple of moments where they do subvert expectations in kind of fun and intriguing ways, but I don't know if there's enough here to make it like a full out, like you said, like full out recommend. Like it's like a more like soft, like, yeah, it's a good streaming watch kind of thing, which I think makes it a pretty understandable film for Hulu to pick up. But yeah, I mean, I think by and large, what the main takeaway here is that we're seeing a good showcase for Pete Davidson, even though he's not technically the lead in this. It is like his movie, and it does
his
feel
charisma though. His charisma takes over. That's another big criticism, is I don't think the Mo character really keeps up with him all the time, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, not enough to where like, yeah, I mean, to justify him being the lead over Pete Davidson. But yeah, I mean, I think. I forget exactly where I was going with this, but no, yeah, I think it's a pretty good test run or trial run for what we're gonna see with the Judd Apatow film, I imagine. Like that, I feel like it's going to be more of like a like full stop, like here is Pete Davidson, here's him like at the height of his powers kind of movie. And this feels like kind of like a build up to that in a way that, you know, like you said, serviceable, fun, good streaming watch, but I don't think it really hits any like high points for me in that regard.
Yeah, I'm a pretty high B-. What about you?
Yeah, that's about where I'm at. Like I said, like B- on the verge of being a B, but I think, yeah, like there's a little bit too much here to keep it from being a good film, but it's pretty solid all around.
All right. Well, we started the reviews off with some synergy, but let's see if we can dive into something a little bit more controversial, a little bit more polarizing. Sure. Let's talk about The Banker. The Banker is now streaming on Apple TV Plus. Now, full disclosure, I do work for Apple. I do not work for Apple TV, so I don't do anything in terms of like, I had nothing to do with the making of The Banker, and I don't do any marketing for The Banker specifically, but I did watch it. I'm going to do my best to be objective on it because I did watch this movie, and but you should definitely take Will Ashton's review of this movie much more objectively than mine, I guess. If that makes sense.
Watch your words, sir, John.
Oh, why is that? Do you have a job?
I don't know. I just
job opportunity to announce?
No. I just like that. Just seems like words you might later regret in life. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. It's gonna come back to haunt me. Right. You're gonna like replay that audio at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This movie has been mired in some actual controversy. So it was directed, co-written, and produced by George Nolfi. George Nolfi, you'll remember, he directed The Adjustment Bureau. He's a pretty well-known screenwriter, right?
Yeah, I got him mixed up with the St. Vincent Hidden Figures filmmaker. They have kind of similar names. You know who I'm talking? They have like similar last names, so it got me confused.
There is another. I think I know who you're talking about, but yeah, I'm not as familiar. I was going to say that The Adjustment Bureau was the first movie Nolfi directed, but he was a screenwriter for a lot of other films like The Bourne Ultimatum, Ocean's 12, Timeline, and he's only directed one other movie. It was called Birth of the Dragon. Do you ever see this one or hear about it?
That's the Bruce Lee movie, right?
That's right. Yeah, it was a biography, and it stars Billy Magnuson and Philip Bing. But then, so this is his first film since then. That he's directed, The Banker, and like I said, it's mired in some controversy. It stars Anthony Mackie, Nicholas Hoult, Nia Long, Jesse T. Usher, Samuel L. Jackson, really powerhouse cast. You can see why this actually was supposed to be a contender at the Oscars. There was some buzz around this getting some acting nominations at the very least.
It's gonna open up the AFI Film Festival, right?
That's what I was about to say. So it was going to premiere at the AFI Fest back in late November. However, it was taken off because like I said before, there was some sexual abuse allegations against Garrett Sr.'s son, Bernard Garrett Jr. So the main character in the film, the actual person, his real life son, who you see in the movie, it was revealed that a family member leveled a bunch of allegations against this person who he actually had like a credit on the film, I think as a producer. I don't know how much creative pull he had with the movie itself, but he was taken off of the credits of this movie. The allegations were made by his half-sister, by the way, I should say. And he was a co-producer. So we weren't sure when this movie was going to come out. It felt like the movie was a little bit cursed, honestly, because it was supposed to eventually just have like a normal release, and then that got delayed as well. And then we're finally, it finally was going to be getting its limited release in theaters, which it did come out in some theaters, but not a lot. This is the only movie we're talking about this week that was actually played to the general public outside of like a film festival. But right now it's only available via streaming because of, all the virus stuff. And so as of this past week, you can now stream it on Apple TV Plus. What is The Banker about, Will Ashton? What, aside from all the controversy I just got into, what is this movie all about? And should people check it out?
Sure. Well, I was going to update. I think the filmmaker I was thinking of was Theodore Melfi, which I guess might explain, because they have kind of similar last names. What's the guy's name? This George Nolfi?
George Nolfi.
Yeah. So the guy I was thinking of was Theodore Melfi. So I guess that's where I got my confusion. But yeah, I mean, to answer your original question, The Banker is a true life story based on, what's the guy's name?
Bernard Garrett.
Yeah, Bernard Garrett, who back in, I want to say like the early 60s, right?
Well, the film technically starts, I think, in like the 1930s and 40s, and then it goes into the 1950s, and then it goes into the 1960s. But yeah, I guess the very first scene is like 1965.
Yeah. Yeah, so it just follows like they're two entrepreneurs played by Anthony Mackie and then eventually Samuel Jackson. And yeah, like you said, like I think in like the 50s leading into the 60s, they hire Nicholas Holt's character to infiltrate as the head of a company, and they basically like train him to be like the ultimate like mathematic, like Anthony Mackie's character, and then having also like the business suave like Samuel Jackson's character to credibly be the head of the company, because based on the rates at the time, there were reasons to believe that other businesses weren't interested or willing to sell businesses or real estate to African Americans. And so they needed basically like a white man in a suit to act as them for professional reasons. Yeah. And then
he was like their proxy and
yeah. But yeah, obviously, I mean, as they get more successful, their ambitions get a little bit bigger. And also, they also find themselves kind of at odds for different reasons. And eventually, there's some more drastic things that happen towards the end. Obviously, I can't say, but it's just kind of following their life throughout like basically a decade or two, just as they kind of rise and then somewhat fall. And yeah, it's like one of those like true untold stories that it's very easy to see why Apple would want to use this as a means to get into like the award scene as like an Oscar movie, and then just bad luck befell them. So you can see from like the onset why this is one they'd wanted to put their support and interest in.
Yeah. So I definitely think this movie, it probably would have been like, it reminds me of kind of like how Dolomite Is My Name and some other films kind of were more like streaming focus, and they didn't necessarily have like aspirations for like best picture. But for this one, I definitely thought, okay, I could see Nia Long, best supporting actress, Nicholas Hoult, best supporting, Anthony Mackie, maybe best actor. But maybe we'll get into it. I think that this is a movie that he absolutely owns toward the beginning, and then kind of just slides into a bit of an ensemble as it goes on, especially when Samuel L. Jackson's character becomes, like, as you said, more of a co-lead. And I would actually, if anybody had the best chance of getting like an Oscar nom, it would be Nia Long and Samuel L. Jackson, I think. Unfortunately, because I think Anthony Mackie is really good.
I was going to say, I think Samuel L. Jackson probably had the best shot. I wasn't really thinking Nia Long, but I can see why you would think that. No, I was just gonna say, I mean, she has like a lot of those like Oscar-y scenes throughout, so I can see like in retrospective why she might be pushed for an awards contention. But yeah, I mean, I was thinking if anyone was gonna get a nom, just based on being like the showiest, kind of most prominent performance, it would probably be Samuel Jackson.
Right. And so yeah, circumstances dictated that wasn't to be, and so now it's just more of like a sleepy, quiet release at this point. But I'm gonna say I think that this movie is actually pretty solid. I think it's like a solid kind of Oscar baity kind of picture. I'm a little disappointed because I was much more enamored with the movie in its early goings. Like the first half hour, as we're getting to know Bernard Garrett, who is this like mathematical genius who is so, he just has all of this promise, and you really see him as a bit of a maverick, as a guy who is trying his hardest to break into real estate despite the biases, the prejudice, and all the racial animosities thrown against him in Los Angeles. But, just seeing his like tenacity and the way he just keeps his persistence in finding success is really thrilling to see. But then the movie sort of changes into a heist movie, kind of, where it's really about these two guys, Joe Morris and Bernard Garrett, coaching Matt Steiner, Nicholas Holt's character, into basically being their white person. It's like, it reminds me of Black Klansman. It's like with the right white person, we can do anything. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that's really the direction the movie takes. And it's definitely entertaining to watch. But yeah, by the time this movie ended, I didn't find myself particularly moved or really swept. And I did find myself a little bit confused by some of the real life events and how they connect with how the movie narrates their life, honestly. I feel a little skeptical about how all of this went down. And that's even removed from some of the other things involving the allegations against Bernard Garrett's sons. So, but what did you think of this one, Will?
I'm not too far from you. I'd probably be a little more negative just because for me, yeah, I mean, I think for me, I was mostly into it when it's Samuel Jackson and Anthony Mackie working together. Primarily, like you said, the scenes where they're coaching Nicholas Hoult. I think that's when the movie really comes alive, and I think those are the moments that are like the most fun, the most cinematically interesting. That's where it has the most energy. But for the most part, I found the movie just be kind of watered down and kind of by the books, fairly basic in terms of its story presentation and its execution. There's little about this that really made it seem like a super cinematic film, which kind of makes the idea of this being like a cinematic awards contender a little odd. Like you said, maybe they're thinking more of the performances than the film itself, but I don't know, just nothing. Well, not nothing. For the most part, a lot of this didn't really stand out or make much of an impression with me. It just felt like the kind of film you'd see like half watch in history class or something, where it's like, not, it's done competently enough where it's not terrible. Like, it's not a bad film, but there's little about that really, I think, from a presentation standpoint, just in terms of its execution, stands out beyond the two central performances in a way that I think would have made this like an honest, earnest awards contender. Now, granted, there are several films that aren't very good that do get into the awards contention, but I don't know. I mean, I can see, like I said, from the onset why this was going to be their big awards push at Apple, but I just think the film itself didn't really have much going for it to make it stand out compared to what we got that was in the actual Oscars last year.
Yeah, I guess the only place where I really disagree, like where I find myself kind of pushing back quite a bit, is I do think even though the movie's not very flashy in its presentation, I do think that the cinematography is really working. It's really cooking for me in this movie. I think that
it's very
just the look
film,
and
yeah.
feel of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's very like there's something about it where I think the way that it's shot helps the pacing, which I think otherwise is a little sloppy, a little
Sure.
bit like as you're going along the movie. I think what keeps you in it is the energy of the filmmaking, which is I think the energy you're talking about with the three of them. I would sort of agree. That's where the movie is probably at its most entertaining. I think the movie is at its most interesting when you're really just following Anthony Mackie's character. However, I think the cinematography here is from Charlotte Bruce Christensen. She did A Quiet Place, and a movie that this actually reminded me quite a bit was probably Fences, where it's very small. Okay. It's very intimate, and it's a movie that it pauses. Like, it actually gives you a little bit of time to just let characters have like a shot where there's just no words, no dialogue. Just you see like Bernard Garrett standing in the middle of this banker's building, coming up with the idea that he's going to have that's going to fuel the rest of this movie. It's like it's cinematic. It's that kind of cinematic quality that I personally respond to quite a bit when I'm watching these kinds of it's the kinds of things that other movies of this genre, like Roman J. Israel, right, which didn't really have that. It's a movie that kind of got lost in its story.
That one was more cinematically interesting in this film, if I'm truly honest.
What? Roman J. Israel? Really?
Yeah.
I couldn't disagree more. I think that movie was so embarrassing in terms of like trying to hold your attention. I think I had a much easier time staying really connected to this movie, personally.
I guess so. I mean, but for me, like, I do agree. I think it's a sharp looking movie. Like, I think I have no real qualms with the cinematography, but like, honestly, when I was watching the movie, I was like, this digital look, it's a shame more movies aren't shot on film. And then I was watching the credits and it was on Kodak 35 millimeter film. And I had no idea that they actually shot this on film, which it makes sense given that's the Quiet Place cinematographer. But I don't know. I think that just kind of leads to my point. It just feels like a glorified TV movie to me. Like, it's not incompetent, but it just doesn't really have much to stand out stylistically from movies that would be up for Best Picture at the Oscars otherwise. It just doesn't really stand out to me in that way.
I think I agree with you in terms of maybe the screenplay, but not with the performances. I think that's where we differ. I think the performances are what easily elevate this way beyond the negative connotation of a TV movie, which, TV movies can obviously be really good. We're not trying to knock them down, but as a point of comparison, yeah. As a point of comparison, I would say The Banker really is like the sum of really good performances and the sharp quality I think you're referring to in terms of like the look and feel. I think that's what makes this one pretty easy recommend for me. I think it's pretty solid. So I'm like a low B, like really low. I'd say that if it was the choices between this and Big Time Adolescence, I would easily rewatch Big Time Adolescence because I think I would have more fun with that movie. But The Banker, I think, even though I would probably half watch it in history class, I think it would be an important movie to watch. It's an important story to be introduced to. Now, I don't know for sure if I think that it's all that faithful to the true events. That's something that I'm not an expert on. But as a sort of like a movie that can at least get your feet wet with the true lives of these really fascinating people, I think it's worth your time. But I do want to emphasize, I find some of the ending of the film, which we can't really talk in detail about, where it sort of pivots into racial justice, I found a little bit disingenuous personally. I don't think the film properly built up to that point. So that moment did not quite work for me at all. But otherwise, I think this is a pretty decent film. So I'm a low B. But what about you?
Yeah, I'm ultimately more negative on it. I do agree with some of the things you enjoyed about it, and I think it has its virtues. Like, it's easy to see where this movie can be easy to recommend. I think the performances are where it stands out the most. And I do think when it is Anthony Mackie and Samuel Jackson working together, especially their chemistry together is really strong, and I was definitely perking up in those moments. But everything else just kind of felt fairly tedious and by the numbers in a way that both visually and just in terms of its story mechanics, in terms of like you said, the screenplay, just didn't really stand out to me in a way that made this really worth recommending outside of if you have an interest in the story, which is understandable. I think there is like a better film in here and it gets close at times to being a good film, but overall it just seems fairly kind of ho-hum and middle of the road for me. And with the controversy added to it, it doesn't really seem like one that, I mean, even beyond the controversy, it doesn't really seem like one I'd want to recommend anyway. So for me, it's a fairly easy C+ to give.
All right. So that's a C+ from Will, a B from me. Let us know in the comments what you think of The Banker. For now, let's move into Stargirl. Stargirl is another streaming film. What a surprise. And this one is now available on Disney+. It's a Disney+ original. We're still sort of getting more and more Disney+ originals. We don't have a ton of them in terms of like the original movies and all that.
We got about like 5 now, I think.
Yeah, there's a Timmy Failure, and there's Noelle, and
Togo. Something I'm forgetting.
I'm sure there's one or two more, but probably ones that we haven't seen. But this one you have seen. I have not seen Stargirl. I'm kind of interested in it, though. I'm a little curious. This is based on a novel called Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli, and it was directed by Julia Hart, who really took people by surprise with Fast Color from a couple years ago. That was a movie that a lot of people... I think it got like a more wide release last year, but I think it was in the festival circuit the year before. And that was a film that I think people were kind of championing as something that deserved a little bit more attention. Julia Hart also worked on Miss Stevens. So I don't know if you saw that one, Will. But this one comes from a screenplay by Kristen Hahn with Julia Hart, as well as Jordan Horowitz. And it stars Grace VanderWaal, who Grace VanderWaal, I don't think is, I think she's new to feature films. She's more of a musician, singer-songwriter, very young girl, plays ukulele, I think, and does like really, she did America's Got Talent.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, America's Got Talent. She's kind of like a Radio Disney person. I think she's won some like Teen Choice Awards. Like she's the kind of little outside of Will and myself's pop culture, I'd say, but definitely aware of her. But this is a movie that she's like the big lead, right, along with Graham Vercher. So Will Ashton, what is Stargirl? Yeah. Is this a movie that I should be checking out, not under the stars, because I should be at home self-isolating?
Yes. I don't know why I wasn't prepared for your self-isolation gag going in there. But I mean, like you said, it's a film, like it's your typical kind of Jerry Spinelli archetype story. Like, I haven't read this book, but I read Crash a few years ago, and it kind of follows a similar structure, which is that we have this kid named Leo. He no longer is with his father, and he is raised in a single parent household with his mom, and he had a very special connection with his father. He had a big tie collection that he adopted when he passed, and that's like kind of like his quirk, I guess, is that he's often seen his father's tie, and he has trouble, adjusting socially. He is, kind of mild-mannered guy, but then later on, once he turns 16, he meets a new girl in school who goes by the name Stargirl, who's Grace VanderWaal. Or VanderWaal? Is that her name? Grace VanderWaal?
I think you say VanderWaal. You can just call her Wonderwall if you want.
Wonderwall. Yeah. But yeah, she basically embodies your typical kind of manic pixie dream girl archetype. I know that's kind of going out with fashion nowadays, but she does. It's one of those things where it's kind of hard to ignore. Like, she has very, vibrant colors she wears. Like, she just kind of like does very weird, quirky things, like sing happy birthday to this kid she doesn't know in the cafeteria, and just pay random people's parking fees for no reason, and just, generally gets adopted by the school for having like this kind of like magical quality that elevates this kind of middle of the road, nowhere town in New Mexico into being a kind of more socially vibrant place. And as time passes, she begins to form a relationship with Leo, but through different circumstances, the school starts to kind of turn on her, and their relationship gets tested because of that. And we see basically a coming of age story for Leo. Now, I mean, like I said, like, because of that, it does feel like we're kind of seeing a film from another era in some respects. Like, even though this is a streaming exclusive, like, it feels like, the kind of film we would have seen maybe in like 2009. Like, there are certain ways, without getting spoilers, where they do kind of test the manic pixie dream girl archetype, not like in a way like 500 Days of Summer where it feels like it's directly challenging it, but more like this feels like kind of like a starter kit for people who like might be getting into like those type of films, while not really being ready yet to like look at them from a more like objective critical standpoint. So like, say if I had seen this, I think like at the same age I saw Garden State, which is probably around 16, I think I would have been like head over heels in love with this movie. But watching it now, like as like a 26-year-old, I feel like it's solid. Like, it's a really enjoyable film. Like, it's well made. Like, I think I haven't seen Julia Hart's previous films, including Fast Color. So this is my introduction to her work, and I think she's a really exceptional filmmaker based on what I'm seeing here. Ooh. And I would be very excited.
You should
to see
Fast Color.
Yeah, I mean, I know I should.
See Fast Color pronto.
Yeah, I mean, that's on Hulu right now, right?
I think so. Yeah, Hulu is the first one I would guess. I know it's on Netflix or HBO, so I would try there.
Yeah. But I know it got a lot of, I mean, it didn't end up playing in theaters here, unfortunately, so I didn't miss my chance to see it, and I just never got around to it. But I know it was supposed to be really well acclaimed, and I know that it helped put Julia Hart on the map, and I think she actually just filmed her next film here in Pittsburgh, so I'm looking forward to seeing that as well. But yeah, I mean, as far as the film itself, I think it's, as another streaming title that you can watch from the convenience of your home, it's, very charming, very sweet in a way that feels fairly genuine. I do think everyone from the filmmaking standpoint really has their heart in this thing, and I do think there is like a lot of technical merit to it, and it's well made enough that it's an enjoyable, an easy film to like and watch. But I think it's one of those films where I think you have to be of a certain age to really get something full with it. Like, I think it's gonna, if you're not like of the kind of preteen teen demographic, I don't know if this is gonna really resonate with you. Maybe I'm wrong, but for me, it just felt like it's hard to not fully get immersed in this film without some reservations. But just looking at it as like a nice, charming little Disney Plus movie, I think it is a really good showcase for Grace VanderWaal. And like you mentioned, I didn't really know who she was going in. I didn't know who she was at all, in fact. So as like an introduction to what I imagine is being used as like a kind of like star performance or star film, no pun intended. I think, it's a good showcase for her, and it's easy to see that she does have a lot of talent outside of being a really accomplished musician. And I think if she does continue acting, she does have a really solid career ahead of her. But I think the film itself is, it's an easy streaming watch. It's not one I'd go out of my way to see. Overall, it's just like a pretty good B- film. Again, another film I think is pretty good, on the verge of being good, but never quite doing enough from a script standpoint to, I think, warrant that distinction. But I think if you check it out, you'll probably enjoy it. And for that, yeah, like I said, B-.
So I looked it up. Fast Color actually is on not just Hulu. You can also find it on Amazon Prime Video. So that's good news, because that makes it extremely accessible. And I'm looking at Grace VanderWaal's, her music. It looks like her songs go all the way back to like 2016. I was going to play a little bit of a song for you, Will Ashton, but you did just watch the movie, so you're good. You're all caught up.
Yeah. I mean, she has like at least 3 or 4 song numbers in the film, so I'm pretty aware at this point who she is as a musician. But yeah, I mean, I'll have to keep my eye out, I guess, to see where she goes with her career, because she seems like she's on the rise if Disney's can help it.
Yeah, sounds like it. All right, well, that is Stargirl, streaming now on Disney Plus. Our last review of the week is Lost Girls, which we've been meaning to talk about for a while. It came out March 13th, so we're a little late. We're not talking about it until over a week after it premiered on Netflix. I finally managed to catch it today, though. This is, like I said, now on Netflix. It stars Amy Ryan, Thomasin McKenzie, Lola Kirk, Una Lawrence, who I referenced earlier in the show, Dean Winters, Gabriel Byrne, plenty others, including Kevin Corrigan, and the guy who plays Mayhem. That's Dean Winters, right? You know Mayhem, like the Allstate?
Oh, that guy. Okay, I didn't know his name, but I know he's like in John Wick and stuff.
Yeah, so he's in this. And yeah, he was also in like 30 Rock and stuff. But yeah, so Lost Girls is a mystery drama about an unsolved murder. It is based on a screenplay, which is also based on a book by Robert Kolker. And it is, it's a little depressing. Well, you know, it's kind of in the vein of like Netflix crime drama. It's something that could like fit right into like Mindhunter, except not quite as elevated as that show. And this is more, you know, obviously a movie. It actually premiered at Sundance not too long ago, so Sundance of this year. And, you know, it's one of those movies. It definitely wasn't on the low end of reviews from Sundance. It's got a 76% on Rotten Tomatoes. It was always planned to be like a Netflix film. Like it never was going to be something that got like pulled or like pushed to Netflix early or anything like that. Netflix, I think, was attached to this all along, I think, since they announced the film a few years ago. In fact, when I was watching it, I was like, man, I can kind of tell that it seemed like this movie was made a while back, because Una Lawrence, who's in it, she's kind of like playing a much younger version of, like, it's weird that I saw Big Time Adolescence where she's playing like a 16-year-old girl. And in this movie, she's like supposed to be like 12. And it's not that she looks all that different, but there was just something weird about that, like whiplash, I guess, that I want to put out there. But as it turns out, they did actually film this just like a year ago. So it wasn't that long ago or anything. It just seems like this movie has kind of an old-fashioned quality to it. It is based on real events, as I mentioned, specifically the Long Island serial killer, which is, like I said, it's unsolved. And there's actually like a lot of tragic stuff around this family and this story that really hard to believe. It's one of those movies where like you have to like look up what really happened afterward. And I was surprised by how much of it kind of holds up. And I was also surprised by how much of it the movie kind of glosses over or sort of states as fact, when a lot of stuff is very dubious in this real life story from like multiple sources. So that's something that I think responsible viewers should look into themselves. Do your homework, you know, look into all the different facets of the story, because it is fascinating. It's a very compelling thing. So here's what Lost Girls is about. We follow this young woman played by Amy Ryan, who is a mother of 3 girls. Technically she has 4 daughters, but the movie only has 3 for reasons that are kind of strange, actually. I'm not sure if that was just like a creative decision because one of the girls, maybe one of the daughters, didn't want to be part of it. I'm not sure. But, and you might be wondering, like, if you know some of the real life stuff, you're like, oh, I bet I know why. It's like, no, like that person is in the movie. Like they kind of address it. And that kind of speaks to some of the more of the tragic stuff I don't want to give away here. But as we're following this young mother, she's working 2 jobs. She's really having a hard time making ends meet. She lives in upstate New York with 2 of her 3 daughters. The third one lives elsewhere, and she's making a lot of money. Unbeknownst, though, to some of the people in the family, but not the mother, she's a prostitute. And one day they don't hear from her, and then some more time passes, and this mother, whose name is, I think it's Mary, it's Mary, but with an I. So like, I couldn't tell if it was like supposed to be Marie or whatever, but we'll say like Marie Gilbert. She tries to go to the police, and she tries to go to, like, she has an idea of where her daughter went missing. There's apparently a lot of clues, and there are a lot of leads that the police just never looked into. And they just sort of, they've been dismissing her. They haven't been paying attention. And Marie feels helpless. Like, she feels like because her daughter has been branded a sex worker, And there's just no interest whatsoever in finding justice and figuring out what happened in the situation. And by accident, they find that there were a bunch of other bodies, like similar cases where these other young women were killed. And they still don't know for sure, though, if Marie's daughter was killed. So she's still a missing person. And eventually Marie sort of like gathers around with these other women, and they try to help each other bring new light, both through press and through their own investigation, into paying attention to the story and getting the public to understand, like, no, it's actually important. Like, these women are human beings, and it's not cool for them to be dismissed as prostitutes, and as that being a reason not to really take this seriously, this whole situation. It's a very infuriating movie as you go along, and a lot of it does coincide with real life. That you can tell there's a lot of corruption going on. Unfortunately, like one of the downsides with this is that because it's a real life event, they don't actually go into territory of like, there's no answers you really get. Like, there can't be. There are certain things like they sort of touch on in this movie where you're like, oh, I want to know more about that, but you can't, because in real life we don't know more about this specific avenue of the investigation. And so in that ways it was a little frustrating. It made me wonder if this would have worked better as a documentary, as something that could have been a little bit more bird's eye into this situation, because it is a little frustrating to go along the course of events in the film. It feels very long for that reason. It's only 95 minutes, but I thought, like, when it was over, I was like, man, was that like 2 hours long? No, like it felt like there was an extra half hour added onto it. And I also think, considering what does happen in real life, there's certain things in this movie that get completely glossed over to the point of, I think frustrating is the word. There's a lot in this movie that is just frustrating. But what makes the movie work as a worthwhile recommend if you're cruising Netflix for something interesting to watch and you like this genre, if you like Mindhunter and serial killer mysteries and things like that, I think you will get something out of this. And the reason is because the performances are good. The two main adult performances, or I should say 3 adult performances. Thomasin McKenzie is an adult. She's like, I think 19 or 20, but she's a kid in this movie. Her, Amy Ryan, and Gabriel Byrne are the real highlights in terms of like the back and forth between Amy Ryan and her daughter, and Gabriel Byrne, who plays the commissioner, Richard Dormer. The dynamic between those 3 characters, some of the more interesting parts of the movie. I think Una Lawrence gets denigrated to the background a lot. She's one of the characters I think is a kind of a missed opportunity. There is a character played by Lola Kirk, as I mentioned in here, who plays the sister of one of the deceased girls, who does get some just really good moments. There's a scene between her and Thomasin McKenzie that is so lively and full of just like this like lonely regret between these 2 young women trying to like understand their families and trying to understand, especially like Thomasin McKenzie's character, trying to figure out how does she avoid the pitfalls that has like enveloped her family in this situation. Kim is definitely somebody who can relate. Finding some of the bonds between these women. I mean, that's where this movie is certainly at its most crucial. I think that the relationship and the friendship between all of them is really lovely to see. I mean, this movie laughs at the Bechdel test. It's like the Bechdel test. We passed that test years ago. That's what it makes it feel like. Like, this is a movie focused on the women, and it's focused on their plight and how especially the men of the police force are letting them down. And it does it without being too preachy and without really just sort of being all up its own, in terms of just trying to stick it to somebody or trying to be like needlessly angry. It feels justified, and there is a righteous indignation to what these women are after. And I just found it really fulfilling in that sense. The movie itself, like a lot of the other movies we've talked about, there's nothing quite stellar about it. There's nothing that really stands out. There's nothing really that will, I think, thoroughly get to you. Maybe we'll get to some viewers. Maybe if you have a personal connection to the story or to these situations, it's something that I certainly felt empathy. I certainly felt a lot of care for some characters, but I did have a hard time, as much as I appreciate the performance, I did have a hard time really investing in the main lead. With Marie Gilbert as a character, not with Amy Ryan's performance, but just with who this character is. I think the movie really goes back and forth between how you're supposed to feel about her. And I think that's the point. I think it's trying to make you understand she's a very complex, multidimensional person, which I do appreciate. But by the end, I just did not get a feel for the point of view of this movie in terms of who this person is and what really is her story. And because there's a little bit of tension between, whose story is this? And it did remind me a little bit of The Banker in terms of like, it just sort of veers off into becoming an ensemble, which I don't think I don't know. There was something about it where I thought it's not quite a film that should be an ensemble, even though I do like all the supporting actors. There was something missing for me here. So I'm kind of lukewarm on it. I think it's a kind of a low B minus, almost like a high C plus. I'm not quite as low as I probably would be if I had maybe seen this. Like, I have a feeling if I had seen this with an audience at like Sundance after seeing like a bunch of movies in a row, I don't know if I would have had the patience for this, but because I was able to take it in at kind of a slow pace and I was able to watch it and get something out of it. So I think some people listening might get something out of it too. I think it's worth a look if you think the premise sounds interesting. So low B minus for me. And Will, do you plan on checking this one out at any point? I'm not sure if you've really talked about it or expressed any interest.
Maybe. I didn't know too much about it before you started talking about it. I knew it was on Netflix and it hit the site around the time the coronavirus was at large. So I heard a decent bit about it, but just like kind of general thoughts, nothing specific. So maybe, I don't know, like we'll see. But yeah, your kind of lukewarm response doesn't make it seem like it's one that I have to check out.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not that much of an outlier. Like I said, 76% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's only out of 33 reviews. Some people are digging it. Some people a little bit more in the middle, like I am. I'm not sure it's something that, is absolutely demanding your attention. But because there aren't a lot of options we generally have right now, it might be worth some people's, curiosity, I suppose. But that is Lost Girls. And with that, we have covered some of the bigger streaming releases. There's lots of other things. Like I know there's Westworld, and there's I'm Not Okay With This, and there are a lot of other shows and everything like that. So last call, don't forget, if you have something you're interested in that you want us to look into, please let us know, because we're trying to figure it out. Trying to figure out what's worth bringing to the forefront. I think Lovebirds might be hitting Netflix early, and if that's the case, we'll definitely be looking into that. There's Uncorked, which was supposed to come out this past week, but it got delayed by Netflix for some reason. I don't know too much about that one. We were talking about it before the show. We're both like kind of in the dark with what that is, but anything else, HBO, Netflix, there's a lot of new things coming out. I'm not totally sure, Will, is there anything that off the top of your head you've been like, maybe this thing?
I mean, I know The Platform came on Netflix and I heard some good things about that one. I think that's a thriller film that they debuted, like on Friday.
Yeah.
There was something else
There's also
released.
Tiger King.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of actually. And then I think
Tiger
they have I don't really know anything about it. I just heard about it, but I think they have an Ama de Armas film coming out soon. I don't know if that's this week or another week or so, but I think that's that. Yeah, I think it's like something with an S. I don't know the exact title, but I think it's coming out.
I don't know
on
about
the
this
site
one.
Soon. Yeah, I mean, I think that might be coming out in April, but yeah, I know it's coming out soon.
That's the thing, is like things are moving so fast. We're not sure what's going to be available on streaming and what's not, even in the coming week. There's also a lot of things that did come out in theaters that if you didn't get a chance, for example, to see Onward or Emma or The Invisible Man, or I think also The Hunt, I think all of those movies and more are actually available now on streaming on demand. So you can check them out on iTunes. I think Onward's going to be on Disney Plus in just a couple of weeks. So those are options as well. I know some people listen to the show and they don't catch things until a little bit later. So you at least will be able to see them in the comfort of your own home.
Yeah, and I think the Way Back is also hitting on demand this week as well.
That one I wasn't sure about, because I hadn't heard about it yet. I wasn't sure if that one was getting anything.
I think it comes out on streaming Tuesday, which will probably be when this episode is released. So I believe by the time you are hearing this episode, it should be available on demand.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this week on Cinemaholics. Don't forget to check out cinemaholics.com. Connect with us via the comment section for this episode. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter. All of that info is in the show notes as always. Will Ashton, thank you for being my esteemed co-host in these dark, dark ages.
Sure.
Looking forward to what we talk about next. From the Internet California, I'm John Agroni.
And for the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.